today? Scott on the line?
Yes.
Not yet, so we figured. We will call to order the PDC Board of Commissioners meeting for September 13th, 2013. Gina, if you could call the roll, please.
Commissioner Andrews?
Here.
Commissioner Dixon?
Here.
Acting Chair Molis?
Here.
Commissioner Strauss?
Here.
Commissioner Wilhoit?
Here. Thank you. Commissioner Andrews, thanks for calling in today.
Thanks for taking charge.
Sure. Next item is Commissioner reports. Commissioner Dixon, anything?
I have
to
nothing
report
to report today.
Okay. Commissioner Wilhoit, Commissioner
Nope,
Strauss?
I'm fine.
No? Commissioner Andrews, anything?
Nothing special, just want to thank each of you for taking the time to meet with me individually over the last few weeks. It was a great opportunity to get updated on a number of items, and we should do it more often.
Okay. All right. I don't have anything new in particular to report on either, so I will turn it over to Executive Director Patrick Quinton for his report.
Thank you. Good morning, Acting Chair Molis, Commissioners, both here present and in the cloud somewhere. Just a few items to report on since our last board meeting. The most significant is that we closed the nomination period for our Neighborhood Economic Development Leadership Group on September 3rd, and we have a great group of names of potential new members of the leadership group, more than 30 nominations, and so we now have a committee, which includes Commissioner Dixon, that will meet to vet the nominees and fill our vacancies. So we're quite excited about how that group will come together. And as I mentioned last time, one of the objectives of taking nominations and reforming the group is to make sure that the 3 neighborhood URAs will have adequate representation on that group, given that we've made a decision to close the URACs in those URAs. So looking forward to that. Another kind of big news item, you may have read or experienced it personally, but since for about 2 weeks now, you've been able to buy your TriMet tickets through your phone. And then for about a week now, you've been able to do it on the streetcar as well. That service is due to a Portland Seed Fund company named Globe Sherpa. They developed the mobile ticket app, and they work with TriMet. They've been working with TriMet for over a year now to test the service, and then they just put it into to service for all users on September 4th. Since that time, I think I saw a stat earlier in the week that there's been over 21,000 tickets purchased through the mobile ticketing app. Globe Sherpa was also a company that accompanied me and some others to Silicon Valley back in April. We had a series of meetings with venture capitalists. So just a great example of how programs that we set up and work with others on can turn into not just real companies, but companies that are doing quite well. At the end of August, the whole topic of the availability of grocery stores in East Portland came up again. It was covered in the press, and this is a topic that we've been working on for quite a while. We had our grocery initiative, and that wound down, and we're still working. And we feel very strongly that that there needs to be more grocery options in East Portland, and we'll continue to work at it. And we're happy that the story gets coverage. I think there's a sense that we're done, and this is all we can do, and we're moving on. And I just want to make it clear that we will use the tools that we have, the redevelopment tools we have, the business assistance tools that we have, to keep working on this. And we believe that communities like Lentz and some of our MPI communities like Midway and Rosewood have the potential for more grocery options. We're already seeing significant growth in places like the Jade District, Gateway, obviously, and Cully, I think, already have great options. So we're hoping to solve that problem over the next few years. In terms of events, over the past few weeks, we hosted a great event on the 20th of August for the athletic and outdoor industry. This was a young professionals event. We had the founder and CEO of Icebreaker, Jeremy Moon, spoke there. Great event all around, a lot of energy there with that group. Last weekend, I had the pleasure of speaking at an event called Tech Fest Northwest, which is a 3-day event that celebrates the technology industry here in Portland with a series of panels and different kinds of events. The keynote speaker on Saturday night was a gentleman by the name of Alan Weber, who was one of the founders of Fast Company magazine. Prior to that, he was the editorial director of the Harvard Business Review, but he has a history in Portland. He actually worked in City Hall in Portland in the 1970s, was part of the group of folks who made decisions around Waterfront Park and the bus mall and not going forward with the Mount Hood Freeway. So Alan gave a great speech on what's next for Portland, and it's generated a lot of conversation just in the past week about where the city goes next. The speech is posted. You can see it on our website if you go to the front page. We now have it featured prominently, and we really hope that it does generate a lot of conversation. The Tech Fest event itself is the brainchild of Rick Terozzi, who runs the Silicon Florist blog and is one of the leading evangelists for our local technology community and a great partner of ours. So we want to thank Rick for all of his work. It just so happens on that same day that the Tech Fest Northwest started the there was a story in the Oregonian around how the software industry, the technology industry has helped lead the state out of the recession. It was, I think, a great piece of news for all the companies that we've been watching grow over the past few years, but it recognized that it's now becoming, it's having a macro level impact, that it's really impacting the health of the economy. So we're happy that the timing was such that anybody at the Tech Fest Northwest could see the great things that were happening. Yesterday was a busy day. I attended the Best Fest, which is Oregon Best is the signature research center for the sustainability and clean tech industry. So it's built environment and sustainable technologies. That's what BEST stands for. We're a big supporter of BEST. We helped move some of the federal research dollars that we were awarded a few years back through BEST, so that they could use those for small clean tech companies. So we were part of that event yesterday, but at the event yesterday, we unveiled our new WeBuildGreenCities.com website. And so you all know about our We Build Green Cities initiative. It's an initiative not only to brand the green building, green development industry and clean tech industry here in Portland, but it's also a vehicle through which we provide market research, targeted business trips, and other services to local companies. We now have a world-class website that houses all the information and features stories about the leaders in our community who have made our industry what it is, and it includes our own Commissioner Strauss is one of the featured visionaries on the website. So you should go check it out. There's a nice big photo of Commissioner Strauss there, and talks about all the great work he and his firm GluMac have done in that industry. And then I would also, while you're online, I would also encourage you to go back to our website, our Facebook page actually, and check out a video that was produced by Leach Botanical Gardens. Leach Botanical Gardens is in East Portland. It's in the far eastern edge of our Lentz urban renewal area, and we've invested money over the years in Leach, and it shows what's happening at Leach as a result of our investment. So it's a great, once again, you guys make decisions here, we put money out, and oftentimes we don't get to see the result of that work. Leach has been very thoughtful in documenting it on film and sending it back to us and to show us what's happening with our work. Later today, so we have a few upcoming events, but today there is a press conference that has been announced by Daimler Trucks North America. The mayor will be there, the governor will be there, Commissioner Moles will be there. But, can't talk about what the announcement is, but it's big neuse, and we will, hopefully people will check the news later on today to see what the big announcement is. But it's all good and speaks well of what's happening in our local economy. Next week, there's the official groundbreaking for the American Asset Trust project in the Lloyd District. If you go by there now, it's right at the max stop between 7th and 9th. You can see they're moving a lot of dirt. It's a big project now. So the official groundbreaking, the actual groundbreaking's already happened, but the official groundbreaking where the mayor and everybody will present, it will be next week. And on that same night, the Oregon Entrepreneurs Network will host its annual awards dinner. Anybody who's interested in that, you can go to their website, oen.org, to find out. We've been a longtime sponsor of OEN, and we'll have a presence there as well. Two more events. At the end of the month is the annual Greater Portland Inc. Annual Summit. That's on October 1st. I encourage anybody who's interested in attending that event to go register. Greater Portland Inc. is the regional economic development entity. They're a big partner of ours, helping promote the region. And so it's usually the one time of the year when the entire region comes together to talk about economic issues. And then lastly, we will have the opening event for the East Side Exchange, which is the new name for the Convention Plaza at Burnside Bridgehead. So I think you've all seen the building under construction. You've obviously followed the project and the site for many years, but we will finally have an opening for that building. The building, I think, is really beautiful. They've done an incredible job in restoring the building. It's 50% leased already, which is where they expected to be at this time, and the anchor tenant there is Cascade Energy, but our partner, the Technology Association of Oregon, which has been housed here for a few years, is also moving over there to help anchor that and be a draw for other technology and software companies. So a lot going on. No new staff updates to share with you. So back to you.
Thanks, Patrick. Good report. Any questions for Patrick? Okay, thanks very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is an opportunity for public comment for items that are not on the agenda. I don't have any cards for anybody that signed up, but is there anybody in the audience that would like to take the opportunity? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to action item number 5, which is consideration of authorizing the First Amendment to the Disposition and Development Agreement to convey 0.76 acres of real property in the Central East Side Urban Renewal Area to Key Development Corporation for $1,542,000. Eric Jacobson.
Good morning, Acting Chair, Commissioners, and Executive Director. I'm Gina Bieland. I am the Asset Management Division Manager, and I would like to introduce Eric Jacobson to talk about the First Amendment to Lot 67 in the Central East Side.
Thank you, Gina. Good morning, Chair Mullis, Commissioners. My name is Eric Jacobson. I'm a Senior Project Manager with the Central City team. And we're here to seek the First Amendment to a DDA we entered into in December of 2012 to convey Block 67 to Key Development. We're asking you to approve Resolution 7023. Our development partner is Key Development Corporation. The president is Jeff Pickart, and Jeff is here today in case you'd like to hear about his progress on his development or if you have any questions for him. The result of this action will be to reduce the purchase price of the property by $108,000 to $1,542,000. This is to account for lightly contaminated soils and the cost of removing those soils that were identified during the due diligence period. Otherwise, the terms of the disposition development agreement remain the same. We're selling the property at fair market value. PDC is not investing any resources in the property, and the result will be for Key Development to build a $74 million 276-unit apartment building. To give you a little bit of the history here, outlined in yellow is the Burnside Bridgehead property. Prior to 2011, our strategy was to seek a master developer to develop the entire property. In 2010, we changed strategies with the adoption of the Burnside Bridgehead Framework Plan, and that really set the stage to try to sell off individual parcels of the bridgehead to developers trying to seek smaller developments. We issued a request for interest in 2010, and Key Development was selected as the preferred developer for Block 67, and we entered into a definitive disposition development agreement in December 2012. And while I'm on the slide, I'd like to point out a couple things about some of the other activities that have happened on the Burnside Bridgehead. As Executive Director Quinton mentioned, the Convention Plaza building is located directly to the north of Block 67. If I can get this to work, I can highlight that. There we go. That property was conveyed to Beam Development. They're in the process of renovating it, and the grand opening for that is going to occur in October. That's now referred to as the East Bank Exchange Building. And directly to the east of that, on Block 75, we've entered into a disposition development agreement with Beam Development, seeking a live-work development on that property. On the east half of Block 76, we've entered into a memorandum of understanding with Guerrilla Development, seeking a office development. And on the west half of Block 76, we're currently working on a memorandum of understanding with Key Development. They're looking to do a commercial development that will be compatible with the development they're planning to do on Block 67. So you can see since 2010, we've really entered into agreements, and we're actively seeking developments on the entirety of the Burnside Bridgehead, so that's significant progress. For Block 67 specifically, it's located adjacent to the Burnside Bridge, located between Northeast 2nd and Northeast 3rd Avenues. It's 0.76 acres. It's in the Central East Side urban renewal area. We acquired it in 2 steps in 1999 and in 2006. And running under the west half of the property is the east side big pipe, which presents some constraints to developing the west side of the property. And it was appraised in 2012 at $1.65 million, which is what the purchase price was established in the DDA, but that didn't account for any environmental costs associated with removing any soils. Here's a photograph of the property taken from the Burnside Bridge. The Burnside Skate Park is located under the bridge adjacent to the property. You can see there's a significant slope running north-south through the property so that the parking area is lower adjacent to Northeast 2nd Avenue than the portion of the property located next to Northeast 3rd Avenue. This also presents some constraints for the developer. And in the distance there, you see the Convention Plaza building prior to its renovation. When we entered into the DDA, the terms were, it was a fair market deal, purchase price of $1.65 million, no financial assistance from PDC, and the developer provided us with an earnest money deposit. In return, the developer was expected to develop an apartment building, and at that time, primarily, they were looking at the east half of the property because it was more easily developed, and some of the constraints on the west half of the property weren't known completely. So our DDA didn't require them to develop the west half of the property, otherwise for them to look at what the feasible development of that property was. Actually, while I'm on this slide, I would like to point out a couple things. So when we enter into a DDA, one of the first things that happens is the developer has a due diligence period. And the purpose of that is for the developer, once they have control of the property and the ability to buy it, to seek in detail whether or not there are any defects with the property and to further test their own development program to make sure that the entire development is feasible. Within that due diligence period, if they identify defects with either their development plan or our property, the developer can walk away from the deal and get their earnest money back. And so during this due diligence period, the developer identified or further investigated some issues that we already knew about going into the DDA, but they further investigated. And amongst those issues are, as I mentioned, on the west half of the property, there is a big pipe easement sort of running diagonally through the property like that. What this does is it presents constraints to the ability to place piles and other foundation systems vertically into the soils. And this is a particular problem in this location because, as I mentioned, this part of the property is lower than the east half of the property, and that's actually due to historic influence of the Willamette River. And so on the west half of the property, the soils are actually fairly poor, and that's exactly where you need piles and foundation systems. So we've got a problem in that the developer had to investigate and see if there was a solution to. Secondly, there is a 30-inch stormwater line owned by ODOT running north-south through our property, and that does not have a recorded easement. And what that requires is for the developer to work with ODOT to see if there was a willingness for ODOT to relocate that stormwater line at ODOT's expense. And then thirdly, there are some pockets of lightly contaminated soils, primarily in that parking lot area on the lower part of the property. When I say lightly contaminated soils, what I mean is they don't require any action by PDC as long as they're sitting there, and they don't meet clean fill requirements. So it means if somebody needs to dig them out, it just means they can't dispose of them as clean fill. They have to dispose of them another way, and this has an incremental cost. So when the developer was originally looking at developing the east half of the property, this wasn't a big issue. But during the due diligence period, the developer looked at developing the entirety of the property, which is a big benefit to us. And so that brought to the forefront the need to look at what the costs are of removing these soils. So here's some of the environmental history of the property dating back to when we purchased it. This is in your board report, so I'm not going to go through it in detail, but I do want to focus on these bottom issues here. So what the developer did is they conducted a phase 1 environmental site assessment. That environmental site assessment identified 2 issues. One was the presence of a suspect underground storage tank, which PDC subsequently went out, did identify and locate and remove at PDC expense. Secondly, as I mentioned, we further investigated these lightly contaminated soils and identified an approximate cost to remove those of $108,000.
Hey, Eric, a quick
Yes.
question for you. On the prior slide, the lines, the pipes and everything, is that underneath the parking space right now?
Yes.
Okay, okay. And then the other question, when the appraisal was done, I assume all of that was considered in the appraisal?
The big pipe easement was considered. The lightly contaminated soils were not considered because at
Okay.
that time we weren't aware that there was a desire to remove them or relocate them. So what we're proposing to do is, because we basically identified a defect with our property that needs to be remedied in order to enable this development to go forward, we're proposing to reduce the purchase price by the $108,000. In return, PDC is not going to have any further obligation to oversee or monitor the removal or disposal of these materials. It doesn't require any additional coordination with DEQ, for example. Key Development is taking on the responsibility of removing and disposing of these materials in accordance with DEQ regulations, and otherwise Key Development is taking the property as is. So we entered into the DDA in December 2012, and since then a number of activities have taken place. These are also itemized in your board report, so I'm not going to go through all of them. Other than that, I just want to point out that I think although there have been several hurdles that Key Development has had to overcome, at each phase along the way, they've really advanced the project, and they haven't let any one of these hurdles stop their progress. They've made significant progress on both the design and financing of the project. Key Development has indicated that, with the exception of this one issue with the environmental removal of these soils and the costs associated with that, they're otherwise satisfied with the condition of property, and if this action is approved, they're ready to conclude their due diligence period and proceed with a further development of the property. We're not changing any of the other provisions of the DDA, including the schedule. Key Development is on schedule to close on the property by June of 2014, and in fact, they think they're currently a little bit ahead of that schedule. I think they may close on the property in the first quarter of 2014. So with that, that concludes my presentation. If you have any detailed questions about the environmental contaminated soils, Dave Oberon from our staff is here to answer some of those questions. I want to acknowledge his team, Dave and Colin Polk and Wendy Wilcox in particular, for their efforts over the past 6 months working with myself and Key Development on resolving some of these issues. So if you have any questions.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Commissioner Wilhoit?
Just a couple, and thanks a lot. I mean, looking at the schematic there and what's going on, I think everyone would have to be excited about what was done to make sure that area was developed, and it looks like the activity is occurring that we would hope to occur by changing our focus and having multiple developments versus a large development, so that's a great thing. Just a couple of questions I asked already about the property and the parking and the pipes and all of those things, so that's been addressed. As far as, you know, this reduction in price, if for some reason they encounter costs lower than we're reducing the price, I didn't see anything that addressed that. I assume they're going to submit to us the costs they incur to clean it up, and it's going to be reconciled. And the reason I ask that question is later we have another item where the owner of the property is giving us a retainer, and then we're going to incur some costs, and if we don't use the entire retainer, we have to submit to the owner of the property the amount that we don't use. We don't have that same circumstance here. And it's not a monumental amount of money, but I would think it makes sense for that condition to be in place, and maybe it is. I assume they're accountable to us for the costs they actually incur. They have to submit invoices and things to substantiate that the $108,000 reduction was appropriate. Is that the case?
No, that's not the case. So when we identified this issue, we had a couple of different ways to proceed, and we talked about exactly those 2 ways. One would be to try to, one was to, for PDC to pay the costs no matter what they were. And the second was to try to agree upon an estimate that we thought was reasonable and put the onus on key development to take on those actions. We decided not to do the first because, one, we didn't think the dollar amount was a large amount. In other words, the variability in the cost is not going to be significant, and it would require a lot of PDC staff time to monitor and oversee those activities. So whether it costs, for example, $90,000 or $95,000 or $100,000, it would require us to have more oversight and responsibility. And in return, if we were to enter an agreement like that with Key, they would ask us to pay all the costs, even if they were higher than $108,000. So what we decided to do in this case was we came up with an estimate that had a reasonable contingency, and we agreed to reduce the purchase price that amount. And in return, Key Development's taking on all the responsibility, including if the costs are higher than $108,000.
I understand what you said. It just seems a little inconsistent with regard to the next item we're going to look at. If we have to account for $25,000, if we don't spend all 25, we give the difference back to the owner of the property. It just seemed a little inconsistent to me. Okay, the last question I have, and it's tied to this issue of reducing the price. The property likely will transfer. I'm happy to see that this was negotiated at a time, even though we're not putting in any funds, where we're going to follow our policies regarding workforce equity. So that is in place in this particular project, even though we're not putting any funding in, we're selling the property. So I'm happy to see that. With that in mind, we transfer the property. For whatever reason it doesn't happen, they own the property, right? They can buy this property, and then down the road something can happen that could cause them to not complete the project. We can't control that after we transfer the property, but that's an expectation. They're going to build this project, and I'm assuming that's, that's what they want to do. But if for some reason that doesn't happen, we will have conveyed the property.
We will have conveyed the property so in return, when we convey property, there's an obligation to the developer to develop it consistent with the urban renewal plan. If for some reason the developer doesn't succeed in doing that after conveyance, we do have a right to either, I think in this case, re-entry. So in that case, if they fail to do it, we have the ability to reacquire the property and then seek the redevelopment.
And I know that's not what anyone wants, but I was happy to see the policy was in place. If for some reason it didn't happen, we can purchase the property back. I assume that would be at fair market value when we purchase it back.
For the price that we paid, I mean.
For the
I don't
price
know if-
we
It's for what we
So it's-
paid, and
okay,
that's in the
yes,
original DDA agreement.
Yes, that's fine. Those were my questions. Rather lengthy, but only two.
No?
Good questions. Thank you. Commissioner Strauss?
Wow, what a spectacular development. This is really going to energize an area of the city that needs it. I'm very excited about it. I'm glad to see that the requirements for women-owned businesses and minorities as part of the construction are going to be included. Are the sustainability requirements also going to be included? I saw something up there earlier, slide LEED silver minimum was going to be the project goal.
Correct. LEED
Okay.
silver minimum is what's required in the DDA, and I know there are developers aspiring to achieve gold. I don't have a recent update on that.
Absolutely fabulous. And then I'm glad to see it sounds like it's going to be a 16-story tower. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
Very exciting. I think the views back to the city are going to be quite amazing. Was the property zoned for a 16-story tower, or did you have to go through some process to change the zoning to accommodate that height?
No, the zoning was in place for that development, as well as the floor area ratio and so forth, yes.
Fabulous. Congratulations. I think it's going to be a wonderful development. We're excited, and we hope you're very successful.
Well, I guess the other two commissioners had some really good questions as well and comments. I was more just wondering about the estimate for the $108,000 for the contaminated soil as well, and just what we looked into as to what that cost pertained, and if we actually did any just preliminary groundwork to that fee.
Sure, and if Dave might want to step up here, what I can tell you is that we estimated the quantity of soils, and we
Okay.
based the cost upon our recent experience with disposing of those soils. And then we included a contingency because our recent experience is based upon the past, and the developer's not going to be conducting these construction activities for another year. And so we felt that it was appropriate to include a contingency. But what I'd like to do is have Dave give you a more detailed answer.
He almost stole all my thunder here. But anyway, Dave Oborn, I'm the Construction Environmental Services Manager. Eric is correct. Yes, we did delineate the area. We were the ones that actually provided the estimate, not only on the volume, but the cost. In fairness to the developer, I think we negotiated what I believe is a prudent sum.
Okay.
And I do want to echo again Eric's statement is, to help Commissioner Wilhoit out, is we are, in this case, actually going to transfer some risk. I'm not going to try to scare him away here, but he's going to own the risk at the end of the day.
Right.
As you know, in soil management, soil handling, in fairness to all, there's probably a risk on the higher side rather than, frankly, I would always feel good if we hit a home run and it came in lower, but that typically does not happen.
Right.
The other part too, the development's going to happen, you know, when you do Mass X, it's not all a pretty science here. So again, all the onus is over to the developer, and I think it really takes a burden off of PDC to not have to negotiate an environmental escrow account, holdback account, and then, you know, go through a lot of staff time to manage that, if you will, trying to perhaps at the end of the day save either nothing, right, or even pay more. So.
Okay.
One other thing to answer that question also is that these are the type of soils that also could be reused on site. They don't have to be removed. But in this case, because of the site and the development program, the developer is looking to develop the whole site. There really isn't an opportunity to reuse the soil on site, so it does require the soil to actually be removed. So we did consider that as well.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that obviously Dave was on top of it and had investigated a fair cost. So that makes me feel a lot better. And it is a fabulous project, and the development on this whole block is going to be quite exciting to see. So congratulations on a great project moving forward.
And thank you, Dave, for sharing that expertise with us. Commissioner Andrews?
No question. I think Commissioner Wilhoit pointed out we are finally making very great progress with the development of the entire Burnside Bridgehead site. And with what's actually in the hopper, I expect that we will have transferred all of that property and have things underway by summer of next year. I don't have to further echo the discussion about risk mitigation. I hear you, Commissioner Wilhoit, in terms of consistency, but there are many, many ways to negotiate removal of contaminated soils and mitigation of risk. So I'm satisfied that this is the right way to move forward. So great job by staff, and look forward to seeing the project.
Yep. See, I'm not earning my paycheck if I don't ask those kind of questions. Will this area be leveled? Will they bring in dirt, or is the parking going to be on the decline area right now and it's going to be open air?
So the developer is planning, so there's going to be different elevations to the building. Fronting on Northeast 3rd Avenue is going to be the apartment building. They're planning for the entrance to the apartment building to actually be off of the north side, which is where there's currently a pedestrian plaza that Beam Development constructed. And then on the west side of the property, they're expecting that to be an above-ground parking structure.
Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Dixon and I toured Convention Plaza not so long ago, and I'm picturing all of this, and we actually walked that area a little bit, so I just want to put it all in perspective. Thanks.
In terms of the design, I believe they have a November Design Commission hearing, and I think you'll probably be hearing about it in the newspapers and so forth. You'll see some of the design work at that time.
Okay. Do you want the developer to come up and say that? Oh, okay.
And Mr. Pickard, thanks for taking the time to be here today. Is there any comments or information you'd like to share with us, or?
Come on.
Good morning, Jeff Pickart with Key Development. Eric did a great job kind of giving an overview of where we are in the project and what our request is today, and appreciate your consideration and the request. I don't have any additional information unless you have specific questions you'd like me to answer.
I don't see any, but thanks for taking the time to be here today, and thanks for your efforts in continuing to move this forward.
You're welcome.
It's a piece of dirt that's been sitting there empty for a long, long time, so it's really nice to see all this coming together, so.
So Dave didn't make you nervous with the discussion about the 108?
It's the same discussion we've had before, actually. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, good. All right.
It's actually been very helpful in the process.
Yeah, he kind of knows what he's doing. He's been doing it a little while, so happy to have him. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Okay, unless there's any other questions or comments, I would look for a motion to approve resolution number 7023.
So move.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Anything else on the question? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks.
Okay, next item is number 6, which is an action item, considering authorizing an easement agreement and lot line adjustment agreement with Star Terra LLC to acquire and convey 3,240 square feet of real property in the Oregon Convention Center urban renewal area. Mr. Jacobson, still with us, and Gina. Good
Gina's
morning.
back.
I got up for a second and then right back.
Go ahead.
We are back with the same team, Gina Bieland and Eric Jacobson, and this is for a request for a lot line adjustment. And Eric will walk us through the mechanics of this interesting proposal.
Thank you, Gina. Chair Mullis, Commissioners. So we're seeking to adjust lot line on a property we own across the street from the Oregon Convention Center. And really, this is part of a transaction working with our neighbor, who happens to be Star Terra, and trying to work cooperatively with them to prepare the vicinity that our property is located in for a mixed-use development. So what we're proposing to do is amend our property boundaries by not changing the shape of the property, but not the size, to accommodate the construction of a private street and future development adjacent to that street. So we're asking you to approve Resolution 7024. As I mentioned, our partner is Star Terra, and Mick O'Connell with Star Terra is here today in case you'd like to hear from him about their development plans or have any questions of him. The result of this action will be to grant to Star Terra an easement on a portion of our property so that they can construct a street, and for PDC to convey to Star Terra that property, which is 3,240 square feet, and for Star Terra to convey to PDC an equal-sized property on the west side of our property. Star Terra will adjust the lot lines within 6 months. Our property will remain the same size, and all the costs associated with this will be borne by Star Terra, including PDC's direct and third-party expenses. So the property we're talking about is what we refer to as Block 47. It's 0.31 acres or 13,500 square feet. It's in the Oregon Convention Center urban renewal area. It's across the street from the Oregon Convention Center at the corner of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and Holiday. It was acquired by PDC in 1991. And when we didn't have a short-term redevelopment prospect for that property due to its high visibility, we put on some landscaping on the property to make it more attractive. The intent of that landscaping was to be temporary in nature and to be removed when redevelopment occurs. Some people refer to it as a park, but technically it's not a park. We just landscaped it so it'd be attractive. As I mentioned, we're planning to move the lot lines. So here in this arrow, on the north side of the property, we're going to move the property boundary south. And on the west side of the property, we're going to move the property boundary to the west. On the north side, we're going to move the property boundary 36 feet. On the west side, 28 feet. And the result will, for PDC's property, remain the same size. You'll notice on the west part of the property, there's a building there. That is the Ambridge Center. Starterra is currently in the process of demolishing that building as part of the overall site preparation for this mixed-use development. There were some pictures of that demolition in the Daily Journal of Commerce within the past 2 weeks. You may have seen that. Demolition is almost complete. And on the north side of the property, where we're relocating the property line, that is where Starterra is going to construct a private street that will run east-west through the property, serving an apartment building to be developed by Rembold companies. Here is the overall sort of master plan for this whole area with the PDC property located in the southeast corner. You can see in red that is the Rembold company's apartment building. It is a 186 unit building. It's already received design review approval, and they're moving forward with final construction documents and beginning construction shortly. You can see running through the property is the private street I mentioned, connecting between Martin Luther King and Multnomah. And then to the west of the PDC property and south of the Rembold apartment building is the potential location of the proposed Convention Center Hotel that Starterra has teamed up with Mortensen Development and is currently negotiating with Metro to make that development happen. So that gives you some context over what's going on in the vicinity of our property. This diagram is included as an attachment to your documents in your board packet. At the north end, shaded in blue, is the property that PDC will convey to Starterra. On the west side of our property is the portion of the property that Starterra will convey to PDC. So you can see our property currently is sort of rectangular, oriented in north-south. As a result of this lot line adjustment, our property will be a little bit more square-shaped. So some of the key terms of these agreements are that Starterra will complete the lot line adjustment within 6 months. They will pay PDC's direct and third-party expenses up to a maximum of $50,000. You notice that they are currently demolishing the Ambridge Center, and that's on the property they're going to be conveying to us. We're going to require them to design and install landscaping on that property so that it's in keeping with the property we own. They're going to grant PDC an access easement to the private street. And I'll go back just that one slide. And this is so that at the north end of the property, you can see the private street. This is so that if any time in the future PDC needs a curb cut and a driveway accessing that private street, that we can accomplish that. And in the event that this lot line adjustment reduces the value of our property, Starterra will compensate us for that value, for that reduction in value. In return, PDC is going to grant Starterra the easement on the north portion of our property so they can begin construction of that private street immediately. We'll complete an appraisal to determine if the lot line adjustment negatively affects the value of our property. We'll complete an environmental assessment of the property they're going to be conveying to us to make sure that we don't take possession of any environmental contaminated property. And we will approve the landscape plan before Starterra implements those landscaping improvements. And in the event Starterra does not complete the lot line adjustment within 6 months, we, at PDC's discretion, we can require Starterra to either compensate us for the reduction in value of our property, or we can require Starterra to purchase the entirety of the PDC property at fair market value. So that completes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Chair Mullis?
Yes. Acting chair, please.
Acting chair. Can I make a comment, please?
You certainly may.
As I think through this, I guess I should probably announce a potential conflict. Some principals of Starterra are actually principals in a parking company that manages our Fifth and Taylor garage. There are no economic interests, but they do some management work for us. So I can still participate in the discussion and vote, but I wanted to make that clear.
Okay, thanks. And maybe I'll just let you go ahead and go forward with any questions you might have.
No questions. I think this is a classic win-win situation. forward. I think Eric has done a fantastic job of covering any possible cost or risk to us as part of the process. I actually think that we get a better piece of land out of it. So I think this makes sense for both parties.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Dixon?
What a unique transaction. You guys did some really creative work on this project and should be proud of what you've done. It does seem like a better property in the end. However, there are a lot of considerations to take into effect. So the fact that you thought of just about everything to me shows that we're in good hands here. So thank you for your good work.
Commissioner Strauss?
No, it looks like a spectacular opportunity. Where are we with the Convention Center Hotel? And is that, if that doesn't go through, does this not go through also? What's the situation?
So the Metro Council approved some key terms. Would you like? Last month. These have to do with what's called the Visitor Development Initiative, IGA. Those same approved terms have to be approved by the Portland City Council and Multnomah County Commission. That's scheduled to take place in September. After those approvals take place, the next major event would be for Metro to negotiate a development agreement with Mortensen Development. I'll answer your second question. No, if in the event the Convention Center Hotel doesn't move forward, these activities would still be necessary to accommodate the apartment building that Rimbold is planning to develop. So we would still want to proceed with this. And I think Lou might be able to give you some more detail on the Convention Center Hotel.
Lou Bauer, Central City Manager. If you have any further questions, Eric and I have been working on it, but he summarized it. This is a separate project. This is driven by the apartments. Leaves us with a better piece of property. There's been some media coverage to say that Multnomah County appears to be favorable. The executive director and I have talked to a number of the city councilors about it, and they're going to take their vote. They're aware of PDC's participation, which is the $4 million loan, and our potential interest in some role in the parking garage on Block 49 if there's a separate parking. But there's been no discussion of additional PDC involvement.
And what will the PDC do with this piece of property that we're left with?
The Block 47. We have done an urban design overview to try to look at how the proposed Convention Center Hotel, the Rembolt property, this parcel, and actually the Convention Center Plaza could fit together in a more comprehensive whole so that it makes a good place as well as a dynamic Convention Center Hotel. And we've looked at some options that involve a separate building on this property to give it sort of a solid edge against the street. And that is certainly a possibility. We don't have a tenant at this point. We've also looked at options that may have the Convention Center Hotel develop on part of this property on the western edge, and then the eastern edge could be some kind of activated public space. We have to work that through. So we really don't have a decision, but if and when the Convention Center Hotel is approved, the VDI, then we've talked to the developers, and we think we agree that we have until the end of this year, early next year, to make those decisions, because they will be redesigning the hotel, to really fit the space. So we would come back to you in that time period with a more comprehensive plan that would involve the eventual use of this property. But we hope it could be redeveloped concurrently or close to the Convention Center Hotel.
And is Starterra interested in purchasing Block 47?
Starterra was interested in purchasing it. They were interested in putting a building on there. At this point, that interest is no longer current, so we're proceeding to talk to them, and if they were able to get a tenant for a building, then we would potentially want to proceed with that, but again, we haven't negotiated anything specific. At one point, we were going to give Starterra an option based on that tenant and office building, but when that deal fell apart, we decided to just keep the property under PDC's control because it's unclear whether it makes sense for it to go to a third party, whether it makes sense to go to Starterra, or it might make sense to go to Mortensen as part of the Convention Center Hotel.
Yeah.
We just don't know yet.
Did you tell them it's only going to get more expensive as they develop it and we hold it?
I told them they wanted to get a deal before Commissioner Wilhoit really weighed in. But
No more questions. Thank you so much.
Well, I will reiterate Commissioner Dixon's comment, commend you on being creative. This is a nice way to stimulate development and to take a step like this and shift some parcels to make something move forward. That's, I think, the type of creativity we want to see at PDC to make sure developments continue to happen. And Commissioner Strauss touched on my question what thoughts we had with regard to what we were going to do with the property. Do we have any concerns, and it doesn't sound like it from what you just described, Lou, but any concerns regarding losing that frontage on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and pushing it to the back?
Yes, that was an initial concern, but I think from a development point of view, the newly shaped parcel is probably even more more development ready, and having access along that new road really gives us access on two sides, which again gives a lot more flexibility in the future parcel.
Okay,
So
and
we think in general we're certainly no worse off than we were and potentially better off.
And the piece does push all the way to Holiday, and we get that piece of the building that they're going to demolish. That's in the land that's getting conveyed to us, right? A little silver.
It'll be raw land at that point. The building will be demolished and remediated prior to it being transferred.
Okay, I don't have any other questions.
Mr. O'Connell, any remarks this morning? No. Okay, all right, thank you.
Very unusual for Mr. O'Connell to be silent.
Okay, unless there's any other questions, I would look for a motion to approve resolution number 7024.
So moved?
Seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks.
Okay, moving along to item number 7, which is an action item considering authorizing an increase to the executive director authority to execute a best value guaranteed maximum price contract not to exceed $2,225,000 for construction of the Dawson Park improvements in the interstate corridor urban renewal area. Dave Oburn and John Jackley, good morning.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you. I'm John Jackley, the Neighborhood Division Manager. With me is Dave Oburn, PDC's Construction Services Manager. I'd like to brief you really quickly on the status of the project and why we're asking for this request, and then Dave will walk you through the individual pieces of the budget. Located, it's a 2-acre park between North Williams and North Vancouver and Williams, and it's one of the jewels of the North-Northeast community. It's also a traditional and cherished gathering place for the African American community. Portland's March on Washington started there. RFK visited, and it's been a long-time community space for all. Because of the importance of this project to the community and the success of our equity policy, PDC agreed earlier this year to do the bidding, award, and construction management of the project in close partnership with the Bureau of Parks and Recreation. We also thought it was an opportunity to do things differently, and we did 4 major things really differently from the past. The first was we took your direction to find an alternative to low bid. Dave Oburn found such an opportunity, which was to establish this project as a pilot project to determine if competition and savings could be achieved through best value contracting. And so we did an RFP process, excuse me, which looks at experience and qualifications and approach in addition to cost. And the board approved this construction process last May. Concurrently, we increased the community outreach through Joan Brown Klein, an MBE consulting firm with long-term ties to Northeast, who worked with us to reach out to neighboring churches, civic leaders, businesses, and residents. The Park Bureau did an especially good job of working with the African American Alliance on some final design issues. Thirdly, we stepped up our outreach to local and minority contractors using a partnership that we have with NAMAC and MCIP to provide training on bidding, estimating, on-site tours, plan availability, and more. And then fourthly, we, through a separate RFP, hired an outside construction project manager, selecting Patty Miles of the Anisi Group. She grew up down the street from Dawson Park, received her bachelor, master's in architecture in the Midwest, and then worked on projects all over the country before returning to Portland. So she's got the outstanding perspective of someone who grew up in that neighborhood, as well as outstanding project management skills, and she's an invaluable member of our team. We received 3 bids to the construction RFP, 2 of which were MBE firms. All 3 were deemed responsive. All 3 were interviewed by our review panel, which included outside community participants, as well as the city's minority evaluator program participant. And all 3 were asked to provide a best and final offer. The winning firm was R&R Construction, a certified Latino MBE firm that also built Fields Park for us in the Pearl. Their largest subcontractor is Raymore Construction, an African-American firm from Northeast that will do the concrete and trucking on the project. All told, the project will achieve more than 88% utilization. Some of the redesign highlights, as you know, we're connecting with the community history, increasing the playground. We are especially thankful to Legacy for providing the funding, along with the Parks Bureau and former Parks Commissioner Nick Fish, to provide the interactive water fountain feature. There'll be better gazebo accessibility. And in whole, it was a design that the Parks Bureau walked hand in hand with the community on. They participated all the way to the end, even up to some of the final design issues. So I think we're going into this project very well connected to the community. It reflects what the community wanted, and we think it's going to be even better than it was before. At this point, I'm going to turn to Dave to walk you through some of the budget increases that we encountered and to explain why we're making this request this morning.
Okay, thank you, John. And again, Dave Oburn, Construction Services Manager. I was the one part of the evaluation committee that had the pleasure to work with procurement on the cost piece of this, as well as John already mentioned on the whole best value. Just to recap briefly, as John mentioned, we did receive the 3 proposals here. Again, 40% of the points were based on experience, qualifications, et cetera. 60% of the points were based on cost. We did go through a 2-step process, so they proposed initially, and then we requested best and final offers here. So the good part about a 2-step process here, it gives the top-ranking firms an ability to really refine and sharpen their pencil. And by the way, the cost did overall come down on the best and final offer. The initial RFP estimate was, of course, when we came to you in the board back in May, it was based on an engineer's estimate that was probably already 3 or 4 months old, but we estimated the project total at about 175 with contingency. Since that time, and I'll give you very recent news, obviously the economy is picking up. Everybody can see that. Subcontractors are getting busier. Materials are costing more. Guess what? Things are on the rise, which is good news. I want to echo, we just opened a project yesterday, and it also came in over our initial budget at about 20 or 25%. And again, if you look on the positive side, it's good. As you know, during a low turn on the economy, bidders are putting in very low bids, and then we have a real process of change orders and where they're trying to eke out every little bit of profit. So I'm trying to paint let's call it a positive side of this project here. All the proposers, when they initially offered, exceeded our initial estimate. So there is no discussion. We had to come back to you for additional authorization here. At this time, with R&R, we've been through we've done serial negotiations. So once you identify the most responsible firm, we actually negotiate down to the gritty detail. We've allocated risk between both R&R and ourselves, obviously trying to provide the commission as much protection as possible for unforeseen risks. And so we're ready, again, upon the board's approval, to lock and get moving on this project here. In addition to that, recall we did have 4 bid alternatives. They were pretty small items, but they were important. In discussions with Parks and our staff, we believe they're all important. By the way, they would include basalt stones around the interactive fountain, There is 2 LED uplighting and trail lighting packages. I think putting LEDs is a much smarter thing, not only for long-term maintenance, but energy costs here. So we think the alternatives add value to the project here. Recall just, I want to point out a couple key challenges with the project. As you know, there's a lot of mature trees there. R&R is going to have their hands full working around the trees and the tree roots here during the wet season here. So they're fully aware of these risks. I've also had the experience of working with Jesse Rodriguez. He's their president of their company. He formerly worked with Stacy Whitback. We've been doing projects together for a decade and a half. So good working relationship with a contractor here. Again, I want to echo John's comment. Clearly, the additional funds on the fountain, I think, are icing on the cake out here. So special thank you for them. So let me move on to just the final slide, just talking briefly about the timeline. We've covered the first couple steps here, where we're at. Based on board approval, we would issue out the notice of award basically on Monday. We would then ink the contract. We're prepared to issue then notice to proceed on October 1. By the way, that's just right around the corner in my world. Again, with our goal to get all the work constructed right now, the final completion date would be June 9th. We're targeting basically, let's call it early June next year. We're all done. Parks opens up, and it will have a considerable facelift here. Obviously, just a couple closing comments. Both John and I want to appreciate the board rescheduling your meeting. We needed all of you to be able to vote on this so we could move forward on this. So we want to say again, thank you for your extra efforts to shift around on that. And my last statement, Patrick mentioned a whole bunch of groundbreakings. Well, we're going to add one more to your list coming up. We do intend to do a groundbreaking right about mid-October, hopefully right before the major rains occur. Obviously, the invites will go out to the board members. So we would request approval of this authorization.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Strauss.
Another spectacular and exciting project. This is really fabulous. Last time we got together, and Commissioner Fish was here at that time, and we talked about and celebrated the contribution by Legacy for the fountain. We also talked about reaching out to the community for other contributions, for naming benches and trees and other things. As that progressed along, would we be able to get any more revenue from that path? And is somebody going to take a leadership either from Parks or PDC to make that happen?
Yeah, my understanding is Parks is still trying to explore some other options there, whether it's a Parks Foundation beyond just what their contribution from SDCs and the legacy but nothing's been firm as of this moment.
Okay. And then with regard to risks, what do you think are the risks? Do we have a permit? Are the drawings fully complete? Is the scope fully defined? Or you think that there are some concerns and risks?
Guess what? Yes on all of the above. So we have a permit in hand. Drawings that are 100%. We've done several, both VE, but also quality assurance, quality control reviews of them. I feel very confident about that. We've done the same thing with the specifications as well. We've got a pretty good, I think, tight contract here. We have all the other pieces ready to deploy as well. We've got special inspectors lined up. I feel very confident about this project.
We're excited. Congratulations. It's going to be a great project.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say the same. This is one of the gem list items that came out of the interstate corridor urban renewal process, so I'm happy to see this moving forward, and I'm sure the community is, and it's, I think, as I stated the last time we addressed this item, definitely a community project. When you have the type of involvement that we've had, you've got Legacy involved, you have people really providing input to develop something that they will own, so that's very exciting. As far as the public looking at this and saying, well, wait a minute, you know, PDC board and staff, you approved a $1.775 million project. Now it's 25% higher 4 months later. You know, is that because you went to the best value guaranteed maximum price scenario? And I think, Dave, you addressed that. Prices have come up since we went through that initial estimate, so I want that to be very clear. It's not because of the process. We're going to look at how this plays out, and I guess one of my primary questions is how we're going to establish if this did result in savings of some type. What are, not to give us all the detail, but what are the key considerations when we look at this best value guaranteed maximum price consideration versus doing what we had been doing normally? How are we going to differentiate?
Yeah, Commissioner, recall in the last board presentation, one of the items when we do an alternative contract like this is we're required, once the project is complete, to come back and give the board, meaning you would be acting as the LCRB board, we give you a report, and we have a statutory list of 8 items, which also do include costs, and we need to report back to you on whether it was, the statute's very clear, whether it's successes or failures in using this process. So I think you will get a very objective report coming back on whether or not this pilot project really did result in substantial cost savings, as well as meeting all the other goals of the project. Recall also, this is both best value and GMP. So part of the guaranteed maximum price is to try to lock down that price to really reduce risk for PDC. So obviously we'll report back to you on how good we were at, let's call it, locking down the price here.
And that touches on my last question, change orders. When you see guaranteed maximum price and you read change orders, it's somewhat of a conflict. Is there the possibility of a change order, or are there the possible change orders?
So remember, in reality, there's always a possibility of a change order. What we do in negotiating GMP contracts, we actually also negotiate a small amount that what we call is owner control contingency within the GMP. The contractor doesn't own that money, it's our money. It's going to be a small amount because we know there's going to be some little hiccups that are going to be well beyond what the contractor could price. But it's my expectation that will be the only money that we're going to be able to put on the table here on this project. So it would have to be a horrible thing. We'd have to find an underground storage tank or something totally unforeseen, in my judgment, before we would really get to a change order. So my objective, and our entire team is behind it, we're actually striving for the no change orders to the GMP.
Okay. Well,
Commissioner, there's also another point too, is that the law provides for a broad look at what cost is. So you've got the cost of the actual dollars being spent on the ground, but you've got staff cost savings by not having to constantly negotiate change orders. And it also allows you to look at cost to the community. We're able to move on this timeline because of the best value contracting. And part of the underlying philosophy for this whole project, I think, was 2 things. One is that the park has to be fantastic, that while we want to be very accountable for the public's money, we're not going to cut corners, make it look cheap. It's got to be truly one of the jewels of the gem list of the community. And then secondly, we wanted to make it available to the public both summers. That's a huge community value. So we'll present to you both the budget costs, but also the cost savings to the community for being able to use it earlier, for guaranteeing that it'll be open for next summer as well as for this summer. So we'll give you a broad look at it.
And what was the minority and women-owned participation in this project?
88%.
I mean, I think that's a record. I don't think we've ever done anything like that, have we? I mean, that alone is a huge success in this process, and I really appreciate it.
we can't hit 100? Come on, you get that close. Jeez.
You're close.
Recall our aspirational goal
Yeah.
was 30% here, so.
No, that is
But
great.
anyway, we're trying our best.
Okay, all right, I'll leave you a little room. Yep.
Commissioner Dixon.
Well, thank you for your report. I understand that obviously it's not easy for us at PDC to have to accept more expenses to a project, but in my role of construction, I do like to look on the positive side, which is that, there was a time period when contractors and subcontractors were literally buying jobs and or making $0 on work. And I think it's high time that the pendulum swings towards contractors being able to stay alive and actually earn a living. So for me, I don't see this as being a problem. I know that you've analyzed the costs very thoroughly, and you could have done a low bid and still been in the same situation. So it's not any different necessarily from my viewpoint. I like the fact that we actually spent the time to find a contractor that was going to fit all the needs of this project, because that's also really important to the GEM list and to our overall goals here at PDC. So you guys did a very good job in this first run through. Obviously, I think our RFP process will be able to improve with time, and we'll even be able to get more participation from a wider range of contractors, and that will also help with, you know, getting a good range of price points. But to me, it seems like the largest possibility of change orders are along the lines of these trees. Would you agree, or where do you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we've negotiated, we have a risk allocation matrix that's part of the GMP contract. So we've discussed down to the widget on which items does the contractor own, and at what point does finally PDC own beyond that. And again, just that's part of the good parts about being able to negotiate a GMP. As you know, in low bid, we don't get that opportunity to have the actual one-on-one discussions. And so we've done probably about 12 hours of negotiations down to literally weeds, grass, boulders, rocks, all the pieces.
Great.
And Commissioner, the tree risk, I'm glad you brought that up. When our panel deliberated on the proposals, particularly after the interviews, I'd say we probably spent more time on the tree risk than anything else. And we pushed back hard on all three of them to explain, not just in conceptual terms, how they were going to handle the trees, but what kind of ground penetrating radar do you use? How are you going to calculate where the big rigs come in between the trees? How do you calculate the pressure on the soil that goes against the root ball? I mean, we really got into the nitty gritty of this, and it's reflected in the negotiations that Dave had.
And there is a solid contingency for any unforeseen unknowns.
There is what I always call a prudent contingency.
Okay.
And then there's
Sorry,
also
that's the
what I want to
construction,
be
yeah.
honest with you, we also have owners' unallocated reserve beyond that.
Okay.
And in fairness, as you know, if I put money out there for a contractor, everybody tries to reach it. So I'm holding a few nickels back in the
Good.
budget here without being specific.
Okay, yeah, you have to stick them to it. I think that's important.
I'm not quite done with negotiations, so.
And then also, I just, again, would like to reiterate, to thank Legacy Emmanuel. I know they get a lot of heat in the community for things that didn't go perfectly in the past, but I think that this water feature is something that will really improve our community, and it is, I mean, the park and the entire community, so it is a plus on their side, and I think it was a substantial contribution. So we definitely thank them for their contribution to that.
Okay, Commissioner Anders.
Well, I want to start by thanking Mr. Oburn and Mr. Jackley for doing an incredibly thorough job of working through this new process of bidding and documenting it. We're all hopeful that this is going to be really successful, and it's going to give us an opportunity to do things more efficiently in the future. The only thing I wanted to point out was that despite the fact that this is higher than it was a few months ago, it's still within the amounts that we had budgeted. And so that we're not taking anything from any other project in this district to complete this bid. I think there's $200,000 worth of carryover and $2.3 million in the current fiscal year, if I'm reading this correctly. So despite the fact that it is a little more expensive, we did have an adequate budget to cover.
That's a very good point.
Yep.
Okay, anything else?
One word I need someone to explain to me. I think I know what it is, but, and I think we want to emphasize this as well, that we're going to have external construction project management on this particular project. And this is the line that I'm looking at on the budget page, if you can see that. I think I know what it is. I don't want to assume it says NICI.
Yeah, NEC Group, that is correct.
Okay.
That's the name of the firm.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I was looking for ink or something, and I said, well, I think I know, but just to be clear, all right. And she was here before us at our last session when we talked about
Yes,
that.
she's in the audience today if you have any questions for her.
Yep, so,
Anything you wish to share with us, since you took the time to be here this morning?
you can tell from all those questions, we're going to be watching you.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Actually, it's been an interesting process, and we're excited, and actually, we're already mobilizing, and we're documenting the trees right now, so, and Dave and John have been great, and Dave O'Byrne is thorough, as you already know, so we're excited and looking forward.
Yeah, we're excited as well. Good luck on the project.
Thank you.
Yeah, good work by everybody.
Appreciate
I look
it.
forward to the groundbreaking. So if there are no more questions, I would look for a motion to approve Resolution 7025.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any other questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thanks very much. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 8, which is an action item considering requesting the city council to issue bonds for the city's urban renewal areas, pledging revenues from those areas to those bonds, and authorizing additional covenants. Tony Barnes, good morning.
Good morning, Acting Chair Mullis, Chair
Got it.
Andrews, Commissioners, Executive Director Quinn. I'm Tony Barnes, Budget Officer, and I'm before you today to, today's action is the request City Council to issue bonds to provide interim financing for current and proposed costs of carrying out urban renewal plans and refinance outstanding interim financings. The action also requests that City Council issue long-term tax increment bonds to refinance the interim financing obligations. So this is the issuance of new lines of credit that will be for the next 3 years in 6 urban renewal areas, as well as the authorization for the long-term bonds that would ultimately take out those lines of credit. So the purpose here, Portland City Charter states that the board must request the city to issue debt. Existing lines of credit currently are due to expire on December 31st, 2013, in the next couple months. The action requests City Council, through the Office of Management and Finance, to select a bank that will provide the new URA lines of credit for 3 years. And these new lines must be in place by December 31st, excuse me, to roll over the existing line of credit balances and provide financing for projects that are currently in the 2013-14 budget and following 2 fiscal years. So a summary of the authorization in the 6 urban renewal areas shows that we have a current balance of $42.6 million that have been incurred over the last several years for a number of projects and programs that we've drawn down on the existing line of credit that's expiring as of December 31st. That'll get rolled over into the new line of credit once it's issued. But it also authorizes $32.3 million in new authority for a total of $74.9 million. The new money, I want to point out that includes projects that are in the 13-14 budget in the next 2 years of the forecast, but also about $13.5 million of draw authority that's not currently programmed, but we do have capacity in our forecast to access if needed. So if there's a budget action through the budget process, through the board and council to include additional projects in the forecast, there will be some additional authority to draw these funds. So real quickly, the next steps here, the council first reading is on September 25th, and the second reading and approval is scheduled for October 2nd. The Office of Management and Finance, OMF, will solicit bids from banks through a competitive bidding process. The new lines of credit will be established with the selected bank following a 30-day referral period. Existing balances will be rolled over to the new lines, while draws on the new money will occur as needed by URA based on actual project and program activity that's in the adopted budget or revised budgets. And then the long-term tax increment bonds will be issued when balances on lines of credit are sufficient to cost-effectively market the bonds. So this, over the next few years, or 5 years, as the balances increase and it becomes cost-effective to market the bonds, we'll take out those lines of credit. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'd also like to note that I have that Patty Teig from the Office of Management Finances here to answer questions as well, if you need to.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Commissioner Dixon?
I don't really have any questions. I think it's pretty straightforward. This is a process that we have to go through every 3 years, you said, and so it's not anything that's new or unnormal to the agency.
Right.
No, same thing. This is a normal cycle. I mean, we don't renew the lines until they're about ready to expire, and we don't issue the term bonds or the long-term debt until we get the lines to a balance that it makes sense to incur the cost to issue the bonds. So this is all in normal cycle, and I think that's all I want to, at least I'm assuming so.
Right.
And that's all I want to say out loud, so I don't have anything else.
No, excellent job.
Commissioner Andrews?
I'm on the same page. You know, we wouldn't be able to have moved the last 4 agenda items forward if we hadn't done this 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So, standard part of doing business.
We do want to invite Patty up to make sure that we ask her that the city's not making any money on arbitrage on PDC. No. Oh, well, we don't want to do that. Right.
Okay, I guess if there's no other questions, I would look for a motion to approve Resolution 7026.
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, if not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Patrick, any other thing before we close? Okay, if not, Commissioner Andrews, thanks for taking the time to call in today. Thanks to everybody here for adjusting their schedules so we could have a meeting on a Friday morning, which is a bit unusual, but we got some good work done today,
Yep.
so thank you
And
very
thanks to
much.
Chair Molas for a spectacularly efficient meeting with a wonderful outcome on every item, so thank you.
Acting Chair.
Acting
I want to make
Chair
sure that's
Mullis.
very clear in the
Are you
minutes.
sure? Are you sure?
Are you sure
I'm
about that?
absolutely
All right.
sure. And I will adjourn the meeting and eagerly await Chair Andrews' return.
Have fun
Thank
fishing,
you.
Scott. And
Thank you, guys.
all those other fun things you're doing. All right, take care.
All right.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's good. Interesting. It's always good to.